Hello and welcome to the 7th edition of the RMI Technical Podcast, brought to you by the Tyre Equipment Parts Association, Motor Industry Workshop Association, Automotive Remanufacturers Association, or proud associations of RMI, in conjunction with Gondolier, who are the suppliers of Jonnesway tools, and Drive Ride Control. We have Juan here from Drive Ride Control, and we have Johnny from Jonnesway to talk to us about the practical implications of tools and the tools required and tools not to use when fitting shock absorbers.
Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction. It's nice to be here today. We're going to have a discussion with Johnny regarding the tools to use on fitment of shock absorbers, which is a very big safety critical component, but is very neglected in the industry currently.
There seems to have been quite a large portion of people using wrong tools and damaging product when fitting as well. So I'm pretty sure we'll be pleased to see or hear what Johnny's got to say about the tools that you require for the fitment.
Oh no, definitely. And the right tool for the right job is more important than all the technical drawings and descriptions that you can find in the catalog. And the list of tools that we currently require is actually not that extensive, and it is quite affordable.
Okay, so let's just talk about some of those tools. Johnny, perhaps you can just take us through what you guys have got in your range around shock absorber fitment. I know it's not a broad range of tools that is required as specialist tools, but there are a few very important items.
Thanks for having us. It's good to be back. Today, like John also said, we just want to focus a little bit more on how important it is to have the right tool at the right time and have a proper range of tools as well. It's all nice and well having hand tools, but as we discussed the last time I was here as well, it's nice to have automated tools, pneumatic tools. This is everything we do. Our range is complete.
Well, Johnny, I had a look at your catalog, and the nice thing about that is that the amount of tools you have available for the fitment aspect of it is quite generous, and by my understanding, very affordable, and it's a high quality product. So one of the things we should touch on first is a coil spring compressor. Shock is a safety critical component, and the reason for that is the fact that the coil spring carries the weight of the vehicle off the suspension, and the coil spring compressor goes under a lot of tension. So if you're not compressing that thing correctly to actually remove the shock absorber, the mountings, the protections from the vehicle, is literally a mortal injury crisis that can happen in any workshop.
As John mentioned now as well, is importance of having a coil spring compressor is anytime you want to work any disassembly, anything on the shocks, it needs to be compressed, and that's exactly what our one does. The reason why it needs to be compressed is if it's not compressed and something goes wrong, it can have extreme consequences.
So what you're saying is the quality of the product is actually an occupational health and safety benefit.
Yeah, we've heard over the years many injuries occurring from coil springs being released when shock absorbers are being stripped and people being actually fatally injured at times. So the coil spring compressor effectively reduces that injury possibility. Let's talk about some of the other tools that would be necessary for the changing of shock absorbers.
Well, first of all, we have to start off with the 7 Allen key. Most sets only sell them in equal numbers, so the 7 is something that is always hard to find. Johnny, so when it comes to your Allen key sets, I know you do a full range, but also your ratchet wrenches.
Just quickly touching on the 7 Allen key, we do have a 7 Allen key available, and we've also got quite an interesting combination ratcheting set that comes with an adapter which you can actually convert into a ratchet. Now this basically means you've got a combination wrench on the one side and a ratchet on the other side.
And that is very ideal. A lot of the problems that we face in the fitment centers currently is the fact that the guys want to use either a vice grip on the shaft of the shock absorber to try and get a grip on it, or they try and use a pneumatic air gun to try and drill it in as hard as they can. If you've got the combination ratchet and wrench set, then it's no longer required for the guys to actually try and attempt grabbing the piston rod with a vice grip, which damages it. The reason why this is very important is the tolerance on the seal where the piston rod runs up and down is only 1 micron. So any indentation, scuff or marking on that piston rod is going to cause it to fail, and it's a catastrophic failure of the shock absorber itself.
So those are the tools that we need in order to fit shock absorbers correctly and not damage them during the fitment, which obviously is a nuisance for a workshop. The final part of the fitment is obviously torquing the shock absorber correctly so that it doesn't come loose and it does what it's supposed to do. Take us through the torque wrenches, Johnny.
Well, as Nathan spoke previously, how vital it is to have the right torque wrench and the right quality of torque wrenches. John, but on that matter, why is it so important to have a quality torque wrench when doing suspension?
Well, the reason why we want an accurate torque wrench and also the right torque indication, so they are shock specific, is that people don't understand that hand torquing is sufficient in shocks when it comes to the top nut, because we've got what we call sprung weight and unsprung weight. So the unsprung weight is your tire, your disc, your brake, everything underneath the vehicle, where your sprung weight is everything that is carried by the coil spring itself. Because the coil spring is under such high tension, if you over torque those nuts, you've got catastrophic failure with them.
Okay, John, so we've covered the tools and the value of quality tools in fitting of shock absorbers. Let's just talk about some of the other issues that occur in fitting shock absorbers. Just take us through that part of it.
100% correct. Is what people don't understand is the bushes in the shock absorbers themselves are designed to move 45 to 60 degrees. And if you've got a fully hanging suspension and you need to tie it up, if you've got an eye and an eye, so it's two bushes, top and bottom. If you tie it up under full tension and then put it down on the road under tension to drive to your fitment bay to get that done, you move those bushes 95 to 100 degrees and you actually yet again compromise the quality of the vehicle. We feel in the industry that 8 to 10,000 kilometers is when you should do alignment and balancing on your vehicle, and shock absorbers every second time do a check.
So just talking about that 100 degree that you mentioned now, what are the consequences of that movement on the shock absorber?
Firstly, it's a noise aspect. Secondly, you can actually put sideways tension on the shock absorber itself, which bypasses some of the bleeds in the valves, so it doesn't react at the right speeds like it should. So most shock absorbers have anything from 13 to 29 valves inside, and all of them work at different frequencies, so different speeds. At about 9,500 oscillations per kilometer is what the average person is going to achieve in his vehicle driving at 80 kilometers per hour, and people don't realize it. It's a very fast reacting product.
9,500 oscillations of the shock absorber per kilometer.
That's correct, at 80 kilometers per hour.
So that obviously is what makes it into a service item, a wear item in fact in the vehicle, and not a for life item.
Oh no, definitely. To take that friction, the frequency of the friction, and also the heat implication involved with it.
And obviously the wear resistance within the shock absorber itself.
Oh, definitely.
Let's explore now the pitfalls of shock absorbers and how people experience different shock absorber qualities.
See, unfortunately, when it comes to the different quality of shock absorbers or the feel, it's largely based on the way that the shocks were fitted. Was it tightened up under tension? Were the correct tools used when it happened? Do people look at the rest of the items in the vehicle, like the stabilizer links, the control arms, the ball joints? The tire pressure actually plays a massive role in it. We've got something that we call the K factor. So it's the kinetic factor, how it reacts when you've got a shock absorber that has to compress and then release again. So a shock absorber doesn't carry any weight in the vehicle. So it's under tension, but it isn't a resistant thing. It just reacts and releases the tension in the suspension to make sure that you maintain a correct body position of the vehicle.
So that just stops the vehicle from bouncing around. But as a shock absorber gets older and older, the analogy is that it's like a frog being boiled. You become more and more used to the poor handling of the vehicle.
Oh yes, the shock absorber starts deteriorating from kilometer one. Like I said, the old analogy of a frog in boiling water, a frog in cold water that you bring to boil. People don't realize how they adjust their driving style daily, because you're talking here thousandths of a percent decrease. So when a shock absorber reaches about 50% efficacy, it's actually 0% effective.
John, just a quick point of interest before we reach the end of this session. What are the sort of temperatures that are achieved within the internals of a shock absorber during a normal drive?
After about your third or fourth kilometer, you're looking at 140 to 160 degrees Celsius. That's why most shock absorbers in modern terms are filled with nitrogen gas, because it's an inert gas, and it helps with the dissipation of heat underneath the vehicle.
John, a person gets used to shock absorbers as they wear. What are the consequences of worn shock absorbers, for instance, on tyre tread and that sort of tyre wear?
Well, Eddie, the main goal of the entire suspension is to provide traction. Now, the shock absorber controls how that traction is put down with the tyre onto the road. So, 4 envelope sizes of rubber is what you have pushing down onto the road at any given moment. If the shock absorber is not doing its job or it's faulty, that tyre will bounce up and down. So, it'll increase your braking distance, aquaplaning in wet weather, and also the wear on the tyre. You'll get feathering and you will get flat spots on the tyre. So you might decrease the life of the tyre by 45 to 55%.
That's interesting, and obviously people refer to shock absorbers affecting braking distance and so on. What is the correct way to test shock absorbers, right?
A lot of people do have what we call a suspension tester, where you drive on an oscillating plate. It measures the resistance of the tyre. Now that is a suspension test, and usually the softest part of the suspension is the shock absorber. The only way to correctly test the shock absorber is to take it off and put it on a oscillation bench that measures pressure according to a preset value that we have. So visual inspection is one of the ways you can look at it, and you can also do a bounce test on a vehicle. If you push the nose or the rear of the vehicle down and it bounces up 2 or 3 times, then the shock has failed. If it stabilizes within 2 movements, then you know the shock is still functioning.
So, John, okay, we now know how the test should be done. How often should that testing be done?
We'd say every second time you do alignment and balancing, so 20,000 kilometers. Every 20,000 kilometers, do a visual inspection and do at least a bounce test. One thing I would like to add to that is people don't understand the importance of your mounting kit. It's the bearing that controls the angle of the wheels and the shock absorber to turn underneath the chassis. The easiest way to test that, stand in an open parking lot, do a full lock to the left with your steering wheel, take your hands off the steering wheel and pull away slowly. If the car keeps on turning left, it's broken. If it auto-corrects, you know it's still functioning. And the same for right.
So that's the mounting at the top of the shock absorber in the car body section.
The mounting takes the pressure off the tie rod end, the shock absorber and the control arm. It makes everything turn smoothly when you turn the steering wheel.
So the shock absorber and the top mounting go hand in hand. Is there any implication with regards to warranty on shock absorbers as the fitment with or without a mounting kit?
Yes. We do suggest that you change the mounting kit every second time you change shock absorbers, and we advise to change shock absorbers every 80 to 100,000 kilometers, and that's just based off the road conditions we have in South Africa.
Great. I think that gives us a lot of information to work with. We'd like to thank Juan from Drive Ride Control for joining us, and Johnny from Gondolier Jonnesway Tools for joining us, and we've had an interesting discussion around the right tool, how they should be used, why they should be used, and then a bit more about shock absorbers themselves and when to test, how long they last. It's been most interesting, and I'd like to thank both Juan and Johnny for joining us. And thank you to the listeners. Look after yourselves and stay safe. Thank you.